some numbers say that there might be close to 50 crore people playing just real money gaming. According to the bill which was presented in Rajya Sabha, they said that this year projected revenue was 30,000 crores for the industry.
Wow. For Dream11 itself, about 70% of their subscribers are between 18 to 35, which means there's this humongous population of sports fans have been capitalized by these people, and it might run families into ruin.
It isn't that the digital domain of play or gaming is dead by any means. Certain business models are probably not going to survive. If you've noticed, the GST rate has also gone up. So gaming is now in the 40% GST category. So even if not practically under law illegal, it will probably be difficult to run effective businesses with that type of margin where 40% GST has to be passed on to users.
What's the future? Is there any consequences to this? Does this tell us anything about the future of the digital economy in India?
Yeah, I think
Hello and welcome to another episode of Gameplay Sports. I'm Rahul Day and along with me is Kailash Kaushik, the real gambler, and Arvind Bharti. And Arvind and Kailash, we are actually going to talk about something which is in the news right now. So have you guys heard that recently, in the end of August, the government just blanket banned all forms of real money gaming?
Yeah, there was a lot of outrage also around it on social media. Most of it was on how Dream11 was the next, continuing the curse of the Indian cricket team
tell
sponsor.
us what are the other brands in this curse?
I mean, they have Sahara was one.
Yeah. Micromax, I think.
Byju's?
Yeah, Byju's. And then so in this line of curse, I think Dream11 was the latest to fall, and they had sponsored the Indian cricket team, and with this ban they had to pull out, and I think they separated ways. So yeah, a lot of...
And just like some of the numbers being tossed around about how many people were affected is quite crazy. Like some numbers say that there might be close to 50 crore people playing just real money gaming. And we'll talk later, there are other forms of gaming available. And according to the bill which was presented in Rajya Sabha, they said that this year projected revenue was 30,000 crores for the industry.
Wow, so that means a lot of people must have been affected by just one ban, right?
So straight off, like, the companies are affected, the employees are affected, but there are a lot of people who are also affected who are not really publicly coming out and saying it just because there's so much mixed perception around it. So all these games depend on payment aggregators, like PhonePe, Razorpay, which kind of help with the payment transactions. And some of these apps have sort of data is there to say that about 30% of their transactions were real money gaming. They were charging a higher commission because it was real money gaming, so they were making significant revenue.
So they were affected.
So they were immediately affected, and of course we know that these companies were advertising a lot. Yeah. So like the Indian cricket team is a very visible example. But
though I don't think they'll definitely find somebody else.
I don't think they have any shortage of,
the cricket people will find, but there were numbers which are like Dream11, I think in 2023 spent around 2,900 crores on just promotional expenses. That's a lot of money for a company which, is still on shaky legal grounds.
And we have to remember that it's not like a golden age period of digital businesses. Like a lot of businesses are struggling, and if you look closely at just the digital economy in India, like real money gaming along with strangely astrology are one of the few sectors which are showing profits, significant profits. Otherwise, even like well-known like Uber, Zomato, Swiggy, Cred, like well-known apps are not actually showing profits.
Even breaking even.
Yeah, so wait, what you're saying is actual material delivery apps are not making profit.
Yes.
Predictive things are making the profit in digital economy. Prediction being of Dream11 or astrology. So that seems to be the way.
Yeah, predicted. So today we are going to talk about the ban on real money gaming, and we're going to try and ask questions about why was there a ban, why would it take so long, and what's the future? What does this tell us about the future of the digital economy and other forms of gaming in India? So I thought maybe we could go back to this question, like, these companies weren't around for a very short period of time. They were very long. And the question to ask is, when did it become closer to or perceived as gambling? And also, maybe we can think
what's
a bit
the
about
history of
Dream11? So, Dream11 starts in 2007 in Bombay.
Okay, so around the time IPL
Around the time
off,
IPL starts, right? And if you look at its original charter, there's nothing about like gambling or gaming. It's mostly focused on sports, sports organization, so there were tickets available, there was information available, there was a potential for them being streamers. Okay. And in general, India at that time was not conducive to this kind of business because like the internet was very new, very expensive. People weren't comfortable with online, doing anything online. And for a while, Dream 11 was just kind of floating around as a sports business focused towards the future. And it's around 2015-16 where they introduced this game called Fantasy Cricket.
Okay, something modeled on the Premier League, Fantasy League?
Yeah, so the model is like you have to pick, like for a match, all the players who are sort of playing this game on the match, they choose a squad of 11 players, which has to follow certain constraints. So you have a budget constraint and a price for the players, and then you have to have so many bowlers, batsmen, captain. And there's a fair amount of flexibility. So different people can come up with very different tactics of playing. And then your players get points for different things like making runs, taking wickets, economy rate, catches, boundaries, man of the match award, and then at the end, which
now
team.
It's sounding like a WWE trump card.
Yeah,
right?
very much
All
that
the stats.
imagination. And then,
Actually, it's the online version of our
Trump cards.
Yeah.
You have a team otherwise.
Yeah, it's essentially the online version of trump cards, and whoever scores the most points, they win that competition. And around 2016, we spoke about this in another of our episodes that. The Indian economy is changing. So UPI comes in 2016. Jio puts this probably the cheapest internet plans in the world. Smartphones are getting cheaper. Yeah. So just suddenly a lot more of our younger generation is becoming digital users. And that's when, they start pivoting towards having money at stake for these games. So it's after 2016. But really, if you start looking at charting, it's really 2020, the lockdown, where from being a niche thing, it starts becoming bigger. Just because at that time, many people started going online and people became more comfortable with transacting online.
That was a time when viruses spread, so this was one more.
One more virus that spread. And if you look at just even any of these companies, the speed at which they were acquiring users was exponential. I mean, in general, all the apps were doing this. Like they kind of have ways of pulling people into the app, right?
And then,
we talked about the similar thing in chess as well, right?
Yeah.
Like it's basically people had time in their hands and access,
and
cheap internet,
playing.
so it just kind of.
How many people were on Dream 11?
So Dream 11, even if you look at 2020, they're already kind of showing like 5-6 million users. That's a 50-60 lakh. And from there it's exponential, like they're growing more than doubling every year. So some figures are saying that Dream 11 in 2025 have reached close to more than close to 10 crores users. And Dream 11 is not the only app doing this. Like it's well known that there are a lot of apps which help you in trading. There are a lot of apps coming up in India which give you loans. And very strange loans, like loans against your salary. So the first 15 days you'll get loan equivalent to your salary.
Micro loans on apps.
And nobody really knows anymore what is the legal status of them, but it seems fairly common. So you meet people who are also using it, and it doesn't seem like you're doing something very strange or illegal.
So how is it different from match fixing, or if I'm betting India will win or not win? What's the difference here?
So that's an excellent question for us to think a bit more about what is gambling and what are the rules around gambling in India. So the crucial point around which it's considered gambling or gaming is if something is a game of skill or a game of chance. But it's a bit more complicated because in India, in general, I mean from colonial times, there's kind of a blanket ban on anything which is considered a game of chance. And states, it's under state law. So states can make a special law saying that they allow some forms of what's considered gambling. So we know, for example, that Sikkim and Goa have a state law which allow casino games like your roulette and card games and all those games where it's very controlled about who has the license, who can go and play, and how the money is dealt out and what taxes are paid.
Yeah, like Goa has those.
Those casinos on the water.
I also remember, I think you had shared a court case where the court argued that horse racing was a game of skill.
So this is an interesting idea that many states are allowed to have also make a gambling law and allow certain games. So we know that many states like Maharashtra, Delhi, Tamil Nadu, Bangalore itself have racing tracks, which is a very old sport, and they have state laws which determine who can bet on them, what the money is used for. We also have some states which have lotteries. So Kerala is one well-known example where they have state lotteries. And they actually kind of justify saying the lottery money is used for a social good, like a welfare scheme or something. So there are laws which allow it, but they largely fall under the state gambit. And then there are some states which blanket, like Andhra and Telangana, blanket like no form of gambling is allowed, which is a bit ironic because we know, like we were talking, that in some festivals there's a lot of gambling.
Yeah, it's a common practice, right? In a few festivals, you're almost expected to gamble. And it's like you finish the lunch and then you have a small session of
No,
gambling.
there are different tables. I mean, this is now growing, in fact, right? It's
like card
more and
parties,
more-
right?
Yeah, it's around.
Kailash, you were asking, right, that whose jurisdiction does it come under?
Because is it like a central subject, state subject? Because you said the laws are state laws.
Yeah, and this is not a physical thing, it's online.
Yeah,
so how
if
do you...
a company is in Bangalore and if I'm in Hyderabad playing, am I okay? Or
So this exactly is where another controversy starts, where some states gambling is banned. But if someone is playing this game through it, these companies are like Dream 11 is listed in Bombay, but they're national businesses and they're digital businesses. There is really, till now in India, no strong laws to say preventing people from going online. So
And
someone
who's responsible for not allowing the Andhra Pradesh people to play on this?
yeah.
So
This is
yeah, all
so
of this is like
complicated
complicated business. So like if someone is playing, is not from Andhra Pradesh but is traveling to and is playing the gambling app, what does it happens? If someone who's a resident, what happens? And who regulates these companies because they're digital companies? And honestly, it's not just these companies. There are many companies which the question comes at who regulates them. Like, are they central government, state government? Do they have individual regulators? Do they have ministries?
Or which department? Is it like the sports department or RBI coming in? Who's going to, put it down on paper?
So many questions, guys. So viewers, Arvind went and had a really nice conversation with Nandan Kamath, who is one of the leading sports lawyers in India. Nandan has written this lovely book about the different laws, and he's worked a lot specifically on regulations around real money gaming. So now let's go over to the interview between Arvind and Nandan.
Welcome to Gameplay Sports and welcome Nandan. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode. Thank you. And we basically wanted to talk to you about real money game, right? So to start with, the act which just recently came out, it's caused quite a lot of stir in media and everywhere, and rightly so. What are your thoughts? Of course, it's been things have been going on for the last 2 years around whether it's a game of skill, game of chance. What are your early thoughts on the act itself?
Yeah, so thank you. The act came quite as a shock to the industry, to anyone working in the field itself. I don't think anyone expected it, and it came really as a bolt from the blue.
Yeah, blindsided, right?
Lots of work had been going on in terms of trying to build regulation, other things like that. And it made a lot of the discussions that were ongoing completely redundant and irrelevant, of not distinguishing between skill and chance, and anywhere where there was, in some sense, money in and money out was essentially prohibited. So it was a very big shift in where the industry was moving towards. I think a little bit unsettling, lots of impact downstream, not only for gaming, but also for sports, which were very intertwined with the gaming industry from an engagement perspective, sponsorship perspective. So a lot of, I would say, significant shifts it has had to cause, not only in gaming businesses, but how sport is being looked at as well. To me, when I look at that as an analysis, I feel it was a failure that we got to here where prohibition was needed, particularly in highly networked economies. And gaming is a very highly networked economy in the online context.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Like, how do you...
So, I mean, in general, when you play other things and you play sports, there's a physicality involved, and the growth is I would say, steady. But in a networked economy, the velocity of growth can be very viral.
Yeah.
So 2 people play, that becomes 4, that becomes 16. Exponential growth. And I do a fair bit of work in technology law, and one of the things that comes to mind is this: when you're regulating technology, there is what is known as a narrow window within which you have to regulate. And that window doesn't come too early and it doesn't come too late. It comes somewhere in between. And a lot of it is about timing, finding the right timing. If you regulate network technologies too early, you will curb their potential, because in some sense you haven't even allowed them to grow, show what they're capable of, and you're in some sense nipping potential in the bud. You regulate them too late, they've already had their negative and deleterious impacts possibly before the too late and after the too early is a very narrow window, and the regulator's dilemma is to understand when that is. Here, my belief is that the law came too late.
Yeah.
There was an opportunity, and there should have been an opportunity taken some years ago to build very clear distinctions between skill games, chance games, to regulate those as well in many different ways. How much you play, perhaps the ratio between how much you spend and how much you can win, these jackpot types of earnings. What also ended up happening is because clear lines were not drawn between skill and chance, it was very difficult to tell, and there was no place you could go to and say what is a skill game and what is a chance game. What ended up happening is that many chance-based games, particularly sports betting, presented themselves in the guise of being games of skill.
Yeah.
And that also had an effect on the people who were originally offering games of skill. Because it's very difficult to compete with games of chance. Games of skill.
And there have been many court rulings, right, which primarily were talking about this particular aspect.
Absolutely. So most of the work over time had been on trying to distinguish what was a game of skill, which was protected under 19(1)(g) as right to profession and trade, that you could have restrictions, but those restrictions had to be reasonable, and that a prohibition was never reasonable. You had to find the least restrictive alternative to find a healthy balance when you're restricting a freedom.
Yeah.
With games of skill also there had been emerging precedent around playing games and gaming as freedom of expression.
Yeah.
Again, Karnataka High Court had brought in multiple cases talking about how play and digital play is also expression. And when you're going to curb that, you have to have a reasonable sort of cause and also restrict that in limited instances. Where we reached was that a lot of the games of chance were being presented as games of skill, and that meant that the people who were offering games of skill started taking greater and greater risks because it was difficult to match business. Much easier to bring someone into a game of chance, the ability to win without effort, win without having to try, and then the games of skills also gravitated towards that. So in this very networked ecosystem, you got to a point where you couldn't distinguish between the two in any easy way. Going to court was a challenge, and that distinction meant everything at that point, but without a clear way to establish that distinction. So I felt an opportunity was lost some years ago. There were some attempts to bring some form of regulation. There were attempts at self-regulation, but the industry lost the chance at self-regulation, and the government lost the chance at what I would call healthy license regulation. So it reached a point where that networking and the velocity had grown at such pace that the negative impacts had begun to perhaps outshine the positive impacts. And you should never forget that gaming of all sorts, skill in particular, does have positive impacts.
Yeah.
But there's always a balance, and the government clearly felt that the negative elements had overridden, regardless of whether there was skill or chance. The positive elements of playing in a digital environment, expressing yourself, learning, getting understanding risk, understanding reward, and all of those are also elements of learning and personal growth.
But now that this has happened, do you feel like this is the end for all the companies that were involved in real money gaming, or do you think this is just to kind of put brakes on the way it was going, and there is a possibility to kind of bring in a little more nuanced sort of regulations and maybe build it back up? Do you think there is a possibility for that?
You never know. The act itself is called the Promotion and Regulation of Gaming. So regulation is, I think, the wrong word, because it's actually prohibition of certain types of games where it's essentially money in and money out. What it doesn't prohibit and claims to promote more of is where there's perhaps money as a subscription, but there's no money at the end. You're just playing for leisure, social games, esports and other things like that. And other games where there's no money to start with, you don't have to pay to participate, but there's maybe prizes that could include money at the end. What it didn't want is this sort of spending of money with the expectation of more money at the end. So it isn't that the digital domain of play or gaming is dead by any means. Certain business models are probably not going to survive. Even if the law changes, if you've noticed, the GST rate has also gone up. So gaming is now in the 40% GST category. So even if not practically under law illegal, it will probably be difficult to run effective businesses with that type of margin, where for 40% GST has to be passed on to users. But that said, these years have been quite lucrative for a lot of the businesses. They've also built pretty large user bases, and there's value in the data of the user.
Yeah.
Whether they're capable
they have
of
diversified also to some extent.
some of them have, some of them have already cut back, I think reduced their workforces. But we have to understand how you can repurpose data. So if you have access to capital, you have access to people who you know are digitally savvy, are digital citizens, perhaps have some relationship to sport and play. Are there other ways to commercialize that or repurpose those users? In some cases, yes. Some cases, perhaps not. Many might be there just for that some money in and the hope of more money out.
Yeah.
So it remains to be seen how many of the incumbents perhaps are back with new business models with the strengths that they already carry. But perhaps understanding that there is a broader public responsibility than just sort of maximizing of profit, right? Being able to balance for yourself while we ask the user to self-regulate. At some point, the operator also has to self-regulate on the type of business that they consider as sustainable and likely to be supported by the regulatory structure.
So I wanted to ask you also about the multiple state rulings that have happened in the past, right? So this particular law overrides all of that? How does that work from a legal framework?
The law overrides the state judgments.
Yeah.
At the same time, there are multiple Supreme Court judgments as well, not necessarily with respect to online gaming, but the concept of contests and games themselves goes back all the way to these cases, RMD Chamarbagh Wala cases in the Supreme Court, multiple of them in the 1950s.
What are those
which really distinguished, so these were about prize competitions.
Okay.
And they tried to prohibit all prize competitions and tax them equally. I don't have the very specific details of that. But what the Supreme Court clearly specified was that you could not treat games of skill and games of chance in the same way. If there was a game of chance, it in fact carved out games of chance from a statute which theoretically included games of skill and chance and said it applied only to the games of chance, the prohibitions.
Okay.
What it said is that games of skill are constitutionally protected. These are not in the digital domain yet. And that any regulation of them had to be reasonable and adopting the least restrictive alternative, because there were fundamental rights involved, fundamental rights under 19(1)(g) in particular, which is the right to trade and profession, and to essentially for operators, to anyone offering such contests or games, to offer them because they are constitutionally protected. You could, if there was a public health impact or some other impact, you could do what was necessary to remove the public health impact.
Okay.
But prohibition was very difficult to justify because very unlikely it would be the least restrictive alternative. If you could prove that prohibition was the least restrictive alternative given the costs involved, that onus was on the state rather than on the person alleging that the law was unconstitutional.
Okay. So, so at this point, there's no legal options available, right?
There are very much legal options. A few operators have taken the government, the matter to court. All of them have been grouped into the Supreme Court now, so that might be heard. The government has also used not just public health as justification, it's used national security, financial integrity of the country. The reality was a lot of these offshore betting companies in the guise of games of skill had been using multiple ways to collect the money and send it offshore. So there are definitely some of those aspects. But it had reached the point where it was easier to be an offshore illegal venture than to be an onshore, if you couldn't call it legal venture at the time. So I think everyone got painted by the same brush. The reality is that if this challenge went all the way, it is very likely that the games of skill could be carved out even from this law based on existing precedent. Again, the onus would be on the state to show that there was national security, financial integrity issues, and that it applied to the whole ecosystem. and it was not just the offshore illegal betting, but the entire gamut of both skill and chance had the same effects.
Where do we go from here? Like, what do you think is going to happen? There's a section of our podcast where we kind of just figure out what could be the possible futures.
So I don't think this business model is a viable one going forward.
Yeah.
The hope is that there will be other digital engagement tools that will fill this vacuum. The challenge is it's not just about engagement, it's about skin in the game, and you have to provide people healthier alternatives if you claim this is the unhealthy one. The things that we have perhaps not done on the back of this law are build sort of greater awareness of digital addiction, give people off-ramps. I mean, if you're already digitally addicted and you claim that addiction is the challenge, and here it's state acting as parents patria, right? It's the state saying, I know what's good for you more than you do.
Yeah.
So then if you know what's good for me more than I do, and my autonomy is compromised, then you have to give me off-ramps and better ways to do things as well. Very often with addiction, the worst thing you can do is remove the source of addiction and not provide an alternative.
Because then you'll find another one.
You'll find another one, perhaps more dangerous, perhaps less consumer protection.
Yeah.
And we're making certain choices here. We're making choices on what to prohibit, and we're making choices in the digital world, which is not fully understood yet.
Yeah.
Not that we haven't had time to understand it, but our relationship as a nation, many people who are in this realm are not digital natives.
Yeah.
Many people in their 30s, 40s, 50s but are still new to the digital technologies and trying to evolve and establish their relationship.
Yeah.
So it can be a very confusing space. On the one hand, gaming is
acting with a lot of fear also, you think is...
So there is definitely a moral element. If you look at the things people have gone after, right? The overarching tone has been national integrity. So barring TikTok, going after some of the porn sites, gaming. But there's whole aspects that we're not really looking after where there's equal harms but may not be so in your face harms. Social media, the amount of time spent on social media, data. So huge amounts of Indian data being collected and you don't know whether it's being used. So there are, you could argue, equivalent harms not being focused on with equal attention. Here it's very obvious the social element of you're doing something bad, but the negative impacts could be much larger from things that are hidden in plain sight, if I can call it that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Thank you so much.
No, pleasure
Nandan.
speaking with you.
This has been great.
Hey Arvind, it sounds like you had a really interesting conversation with Nandan.
Totally, yeah.
So I thought this was a good time to ask that now this ban is done, like what's the future? Like, is there any consequences to this? Is there going to be any change? Does this tell us anything about the future of the digital economy in India?
Yeah, I think at least from my conversation, what I learned was we are like in a very crucial moment for real money gaming and for digital economy as well, where I think, especially let's look at real money gaming, I think it's obviously not like a full stop. There will be, the companies will come back in some way, though there have been, I think, a lot of jobs that have gone, but they will come back and there will be some sort of a reinvention of the space, because it just grew so fast without having any regulations, and now it's like the axe has come down really hard. So I think there will be some sort of a consolidation that will happen. That's the sense I was getting from Nandan when we spoke about it.
What do you think will be the future?
So, you have to ask yourself this question that was these companies doing anything per se wrong? And if you look at it from outside, when we look at from the earlier 90s, 2000s, it feels like, wait, what is this? What's the benefit of this? But if you look at from today's age, essentially they are like any of these companies which are trying to enter a new field. So I'll give you another alternative business. So cryptocurrency was really big a few years ago, and there were Indian companies which developed their own platforms and did advertising and encouraged people to come.
There were a lot of those ads as well.
There were a lot of those ads as well.
Lots.
And cryptocurrency is well shown that it's not like stocks or shares. Like, it's not linked to a legal basis. there is a lot of unknown about it, and people can make huge winnings or losings on it. And for a while it went unregulated, and then suddenly the government just came and banned it, which was fair. But for all the companies which spent so much building up the brand, which spent so much creating a product, which had employees, which had customers, overnight they got killed.
I think there is, a bit of a moral position which I would like to take, where we might have to think of the larger societal implication. If we give the responsibility on the individual, that right, hey, you are making a rational decision and you can win or whatever. But I think in the current situation India is in, we need to take into account how the wealth gap is so much, and majority of the youth are in India, unemployment is high, and for Dream11 itself, about 70% of their subscribers are between 18 to 35, which means there's this humongous population of sports fans. Remember, they're not creating a product, they're already basing it on an existing product. So sports fans whose both knowledge of the sports and their misery of their lives have been capitalized by these people, and it might run families into ruin, right? We have seen gambling affect families before. And more importantly, why aren't these companies reinvesting in sports, right? They could have just, instead of the tax, gave money like a CSR at least to Khelo India, sporting academies and things like that.
Yeah, but in some sense, like the engagement that these apps brought to sports is there. Like it's not like maybe in a direct money terms, but let's say from a casual fan, you are now somebody who's much more informed. We're looking at like the tactics and all of that a lot more. So maybe even people who are not so engaged in sport are now engaged in sport. So that was another, I think that was a good aspect of some of these apps which brought more people to sports.
Yeah, the other problem I had was, yes, these are sports fans, they are very knowledgeable, but with sports also comes this thing of, understanding fame, right? And Dream11 would do this in cricket match. They would say, this person is the winner of this week. They have, right? So which means you are not only trying to escape the material reality, you also want the 30 seconds of fame. And Dream11 is giving you this golden ticket, right? And I think in the current situation we are in, that golden ticket is very immoral because of the economic situation that we are in, and I think that has to be taken into consideration. So somewhere I think the ban might have been necessary to figure out how do we balance.
Yeah, for sure.
So from sometimes with something bad, something also good comes out. So if you look closely at this bill, the promotion and regulation of online gaming, real money gaming is one form of gaming. But you have social and casual games, and you have a very interesting upcoming kind of games called esports. And listeners, in our next episode, we are going to tell you a lot more about esports and how it's a really upcoming sector in India and why we are all really excited about it. So please like and subscribe our podcast and let us know what are your thoughts on real money gaming. Do you think it should have been banned or could it have been handled in a different way? And we'll be back really soon with an episode on esports. See you all soon. Have a good day.
You're listening to.
आप सुन रहे हैं.
You're listening.
तुम सुनो था.
നിങ്ങൾ കേൾക്കുന്നത്
ന്യൂ കേൾता इधरा. रे कथा सुन. Radio
Azim Premji
University.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. This non-commercial program is for educational purposes only.